Thank you for joining us here.
Thanks.
Erika, we just went through the demos and everything.
Yeah.
How did you get started with Barstool?
How many people here are familiar with Barstool?
100%, I'm
awesome.
certain.
Yeah. I lived in Boston when Dave was handing out the paper, and I lived with 10 girls in this horrible ramshackle house, and basically we rode the T all the time, so I used to grab the paper. And Barstool was, at that point in time, this was early 2000s, it was the way that guys that I knew talked. Like, it was the way they talked, it was the way they thought, it was the way we felt about the Patriots or about Boston media. And, you know, anyone who's from Boston or knows Boston, it's an incredible sports town. And I loved Barstool from the jump as a fan. I wore a ton of their T-shirts. I thought Dave was like this Pied Piper, Don Quixote type of character, and it was cool to think of him just in this universe that he was creating for himself. And I liked that there was this guy who was doing something that no one thought made any sense and nobody wanted to support, and everyone who was an authority thought was pretty terrible. And yet he made his way. And I went on and worked at, major companies. First I started my career in broadcast buying. Before that, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, which just was not going to happen. But net, I worked at big companies that were all about just harnessing the internet and creating distribution and, building billion-dollar businesses. And I loved that. And I had in 2014, I had launched a startup called Backstage, where I basically was trying to help music artists create direct-to-consumer businesses, because music artists are, if you look at social media, they drive 80% of all engagement, all time spent, all follows, and they have no business model. But Facebook and Google and others Twitter make a tremendous amount of money from music artists, and the artists don't see any of that revenue. And the company I looked at and used it as an example was Barstool Sports. And even though Barstool didn't have any technology, and I'm not really sure they really knew what they were doing on that front, but now I'm very sure they didn't. No, but net, I had gone to raise money for Backstage, and with the then CEO, and the Sheridan Group said, we just, 2 weeks ago, bought a majority stake in this company you've never heard of called Barstool Sports. And I was like, oh, I've heard of Barstool Sports. And the rest was kind of history. I met Dave through a mutual friend probably 4 months later, and I thought he was brilliant. And I thought he was everything I thought that I had watched from the outside, but in a really smart, I actually thought he was incredibly humble, incredibly passionate, incredibly hardworking individual. And we've been building this business together ever since.
Did you consider it a risk at the time to go to Barstool?
Yeah, it was definitely a risk because it wasn't conventional. I think prior to Backstage, I was the CMO of AOL, and I think everybody thought that I had gotten to the place that I should be or should want to be. And what I realized when I got to the CMO seat, which I'd worked so hard for, I was bored. Like, I just was like, this isn't, there's no energy. I am at the top of the heap, but is this the heap I want to be at the top of? Like, I felt that I had more to offer than just marketing. And I wanted to operate and grow a company. I've tried that several times in my career, and, some have been very successful and some have not been successful at all. But I really wanted to build something, and what I saw in Barstool was something incredible to build. And, it's talked a lot about, like, I was rejected a lot for going to Barstool, that this was a bad choice, that this was a dead end for my career, that this was beneath me, that this was a subpar decision that I was making. But I liked that ultimately, because then, I have no choice even today but to win.
So in 2016, you described Barstool as somebody from the Boston area, riding the T, and it was a very parochial type of I almost said newsletter, but publication.
Yeah.
What did you see in it that you thought could go national?
So I saw a couple things in Barstool. One was I saw it personally, whereby I could read a blog that Dave wrote. I was very riled up about Tom Brady and Deflategate. I'm a big Patriots fan.
He cheated.
He did not cheat. Anyways, we'll take that one offline, John.
All right,
But
all right.
After Brady was screwed by Roger Goodell and the NFL, Dave wrote a great blog about it. And I remember it was a Saturday morning. It was in August, and this is probably 2015. And at the bottom of the blog was an ad for free Brady t-shirts. And I remember buying 5. And that was amazing that I felt so strongly about a piece of content that was written, that I read on the internet, that was related to something that was happening for me around my sports team, that I wanted to transact that quickly. And the user interface was very poor. The shopping experience, I mean, the shirts still don't show up for weeks on end, but I was willing to go through a hurdle to get what I wanted and to be closer to this brand that I was reading. And the other thing was, when I looked at Google, what I saw was most of the internet has what I would call tourist traffic. There's people who flit by and they're captured for a second, but they don't really stay, and they certainly don't return, and they really don't spend any time. And when you looked at Barstool, even in 2016, people come 20 plus times a day. They spend 45 minutes plus with this brand. And at that time, the only thing that was comparable was daily fantasy. And what I saw was, if you could harness this content and you could build this brand and you could move them into video and you could move them into new products and you could move them into new, personalities and new markets, if you could take even 10 visits a day in 20 minutes, that's better than most any other place on the internet, outside of, let's say, a social platform. So I knew that there was huge potential.
What's unique to me about Barstool is that all the tentacles of it. You have merch, you have, not just content, you have sort of mainstreamish type content, and then you have sort of more off the wall content.
Yep.
How do you describe Barstool? What is Barstool? In 10 words or less.
Yeah, I think Barstool is the way, it started as guys, but I think Barstool is the way that young people, or guys or girls, if you were sitting at a bar talking to your friends about stuff you care about without any cameras on, we are that with the camera on. Like, that's what we are. We're what people talk about. We're what they're thinking. We're what they think is funny. But that's what makes Barstool so different, is that whatever we do, whether it's gambling, entertainment, comedy, sports, hockey, basketball, you name it, we call it like we see it and like a regular person sees it. And that's what makes us infinitely more relatable and infinitely more compelling, because we're not professing, no one on our editorial team or Dave professes to be an expert at anything besides being Dave or being who they are. And I think that resonates in a way where, I don't know about you guys can tell me more than I know, but I don't think people like to be talked down to. I don't think people care that someone in a suit behind a desk, what they have to say about whatever it is they may be talking about. I think the internet disrupted everything. It commoditized media, and personality is the only thing that will break through. And what we do better than anyone is personality.
It's been quite a year in terms of the press coverage of Barstool. You had the Daily Beast story. The headline was "The Sports Culture of Online Hate." Deadspin goes after you all the time. Every time if you Google Erika Nardini and misogyny, it comes up there's an embarrassing number
Thanks,
of
John.
hits there. I know. Sorry about that. Why all? Do you get the sense that you've made it just because people are talking about you so much?
Yeah, I think we are, it's kind of like what I mentioned, which is no one has ever helped Barstool Sports, ever. Or very few people have helped Barstool Sports corporately. And I think we have become something worth attacking. I think that we are much bigger than we were in 2016. When I got to Barstool, there were 3 of us in New York, or 4 of us. There was Kevin Clancy, Keith Markovich, there was Dave and I. Everyone else lived in Boston. There was no P&L. They didn't have email. They had never heard of Slack. They didn't talk to one another. They just knew that they had to drop a blog every 30 minutes. And since then, we have just exploded onto the scene, and it's changed things. Like, it's, we're watched much more critically than we ever were. We are threatening. We're way more threatening than we ever were. And we're formidable. We're taking people's ad dollars. We're taking time from young people are spending with us instead of spending them in other places. We're now showing up on the charts next to, it's Turner, ESPN, Fox, Barstool Sports. It's WWE and Barstool Sports. Like, nobody ever thought Barstool Sports was going to be on that list. It was like a guilty pleasure you had on your phone or a website you went to. So, I do think there are a lot of people who do not like Barstool Sports and who will continue not to like Barstool Sports. And there is a good business of page views in, as you may know, in talking about Barstool Sports.
A lot of those articles were very personal about you, just
Totally.
as being, you're one of the most influential women in sports business. And they see you as sort of an acceptable face for, this sort of, guy culture. I'm going to use the word misogyny again, whatever. I know that irritates you to no end.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's enough women in sports business, period. So, like, I hope you guys go into, the only reason I'm on the list is because there's like three to five other women to choose from. But, what I would say is, what I think is most sexist in the attacks on Barstool Sports is that I am just at Barstool Sports to launder its image. Like, that pisses me off to no end. And I think it's disrespectful to women, and I think it's disrespectful to the type of company we have built. I put our company at the top of the list in terms of a well-run, well-managed, radically transparent company. So one of the things that we do that's very different than conventional wisdom and different from anyone else, I would argue, on the planet is when things happen, we talk about them openly. There's nothing hidden. There's nothing insidious in Barstool. Everything is out in the open. We have cameras everywhere. There's always a microphone on. And, we're equal opportunity. So when we have a female talent like Casey Smith, or, we just launched a podcast with a really fantastic woman named Ellie Schnitt yesterday, we give Ellie the same tools, the same pay, the same opportunity we give anybody else. And we give her the same creative freedom that we've given to people and Dave has given to people for the last 15 years. So, I don't think Barstool is for everyone. We were talking before we came out here, which is some people don't get the humor, don't like the humor, don't get the personalities, don't like the personalities. We're not talking to them. And I'm not going to change who we are to be more palatable to an audience who is ultimately not long-term interested in having an engagement with this brand.
We're going to go to questions in about 5 minutes, so think of some and we'll come to you. I have a 19-year-old son that really doesn't care at all about what I do for a living, except for Big Cat has retweeted me on occasion, and then I get texted from him immediately saying, like, wow, like I really made it. One of the red flags that I see for your business is he's a 19-year-old boy, and he is going to become eventually 26 or a 30-year-old boy. How are you able to maintain your coolness within that group while trying to keep him as a 30-year-old? Yeah,
like we were, I feel good about us. I think Barstool is, one part of us is just an influencer, not a network, but we're a collection of very influential people smashed together with a media company. And that, you don't see that now. There's no companies out there like ours. You see networks of influencers. There was, the big boom of the MCN, multi-channel network businesses, which didn't actually work out. But we're a pool of influencers, and we're building a media company built around those influencers and other influencers that we build from within Barstool. What makes us different from most anyone else, or, a good example of a Stern, is that, Howard Stern has the Whack Pack, and they're awesome, and they're funny, and they're compelling. They're roughly all the same age, and they've roughly moved together. When you look at Barstool, we have a demographic that's deeply engaged with us from the age of 12. Like I have more preteen kids talking about pizza reviews. They don't necessarily read the blog. They don't know the backstory on Dave or Dan or Kevin. They don't listen to Pardon My Take per se, but they are on Instagram and they're watching pizza reviews. So we are able to make content that's going to take your son and kids younger than your son from 12 to being 19, 19 to 36, like we've got you. Like you like sports, we've got stuff for you. You like entertainment, we've got stuff for you. You live in New York or you live in a major metropolitan area or in a college town or in the Midwest, like we've got you. And then we're starting to build other brands that, resonate beyond age. So Zero Blog 30 is a great example where we have a, thriving military podcast that really just speaks to vets. We have Podfathers because, 2 summers ago, I went and looked at all of the top parenting podcasts. And all the top parenting podcasts are by women, and most of them are Christian women. And I'm like, well, we don't have a whole lot of Christian women around here, but we've got a handful of dads who will call it like it is and being a dad. And so, we will continue to grow IP that maps to that audience. And, a great example is we launched our girls site last week. So a week ago, we launched Chicks. And I think that's going to be a massive, massive, massive brand for us. And we're going to do it in only the way we do it, which is not listening to anyone else, not following a very prescribed formula, not putting people into a box, and we'll keep growing.
So from my perspective, as I look at Barstool as a middle-aged man, I think you have 2 breakout stars in Big Cat and PFT.
Mm-hmm.
Do you worry that the brand is too associated to 2 people that when their contracts are up could just take off to somewhere else?
Yeah, sure. I think about talent all the time. We're a very talent-centric company. We love our talent. Most, 99% of our talent is born from Barstool. And I think one of the biggest mistakes Dave and I have made was when we launched our Sirius channel a year ago. It's the #1 streaming channel on Sirius. We launched it in January of 2018. And Sirius gave us feedback of, hey, you guys should go smarten up and straighten up and get some ESPN talent and get some Fox talent, get people from NBC. Go get some professionals to be on your air. So we did. And they didn't necessarily fit. We have a work ethic. We are an internet company, so we work like the internet. The internet's 24/7. It doesn't quit. It's never going to quit. So when you make a piece of content, talking about the content, reacting to the content, sharing the content is a whole world around a particular piece of content. And what we found is when we brought in people from traditional media, they only knew how to do one thing, which is to be told what time to show up, to be told which way to look at the camera, and to be told what the script was. And that's not Barstool. We don't have a script. We don't have a producer telling you when to show up, and we don't have a format that we're going to put you in. You need to create a format. So when I think about talent, not only are we building talent, but we're building IP. So Pardon My Take, I think is the single most influential, compelling, original piece of content in sports. I want Big Cat and PFT to love being at Barstool for as long as humanly possible. We also have 48 other personalities who we're growing daily, who will become the next Big Cat and who will become the next PFT. And they will be women, they will be people of color, they will be people with all different backgrounds, and they will find their own niche. So I don't think we're overly dependent on any handful of personalities. I think we're synonymous with a handful of personalities. And, I spend a lot of time thinking about how we diversify that.
We have about 10 or 15 minutes. I want to go to questions if we have any.
Sure. So,
Can you,
my name's David.
and where are you from?
From Miami, but in sports management, I guess relevant to this, the sports management program. You've talked about, the attacker mentality. One deviation from that seemed to be the attempt at Barstool Van Talk, working with ESPN.
R.I.P.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what were your main takeaways from that experience, and are you looking to still kind of, like the things that you thought you were going to achieve, do you think, are those still a priority and you're just going to do them yourself and just, leave everyone else out of it, or scrap that idea and stick to what you're good at?
Yeah, great question, David.
Is TV a be-all and end-all?
No, TV's dead. Just kidding. Not really, but so is everyone here familiar with Van Talk? We had a 1-episode show on ESPN 2. So here's my 2 cents on Van Talk. One is I think it was an awesome show. Like PFT, Hank, Big Cat, I think they produced one of the weirdest Wayne's World sports shows you've ever seen. And if anyone here watches Barstool Sports Advisors was born out of Van Talk. So I'm really proud of that. And I really stand by them creatively. I think they are exceptional talent. And I think that show was incredible. We drove ratings for that show, conversation about ESPN, and tune into that show, which was, I think, at 1 or 1:30 in the morning on a Tuesday night in a way that was unheard of on ESPN. ESPN obviously canceled Barstool because of the controversial nature of the brand and essentially tried to say that they wanted to distance themselves from Barstool, even though Barstool Sports was in the name of the show. I think it was fine. Like, I actually have no regrets about doing the show. I think we learned a lot about long-form production. I think we learned a lot about how a network is wired and what they care about and how they operate. I also think that, I know we had billions of media impressions around Barstool Sports after that cancellation. It became a very big topic. And I think there are probably hundreds and if not thousands of people that said, there's this little internet company that just got rejected by ESPN. I wonder what those guys are about. So I think ultimately it behooved us. We wanted to be on television to become more of a national brand. I think we got there. I think we got there in a more controversial, disruptive way than we had intended. What I also saw was that essentially we would spend, we spent weeks. We created 2 episodes. We spent weeks on the production of those episodes. And the same thing had happened to us. We had done a special at the Super Bowl for Comedy Central on the Rundown. We spent, our entire company, we're a very small company, spent days producing what ended up being 22 minutes of television. And in hindsight, it kind of capsized us because we had all of our best talent working on one show format that lived in one place, when really what we're good at is simultaneously, quickly, very efficiently producing a ton of content that lives simultaneously in a ton of places. And I will always bet on that going forward. I will not put my eggs in one basket where someone who is not as attuned to what a 21-year-old wants as we are is dictating what our content looks like. So I'll never do that again. What we will do is make our content easier to find, easier to watch. I mean, we don't have an OTT channel. We should have an OTT channel. Like, people should be able to watch a rundown on a television, not on your phone. So like, we will make it easier to watch more content from Barstool and to engage in it in a way that's more comfortable, like physically comfortable. And we will continue to explore distribution. I don't think you will find us looking for the validation and to be fit into someone else's airwaves the way we did last year. I spent 9 months on that deal single-handedly, and that was a waste of my time.
What did you learn about working with a publicly traded big media company? Is that something that it's off the table now because of that? No, there's a lot of media companies we love. We love the platforms because we can grow. We are very self-reliant as a company, so what we do is find out what's free and publicly available to us, and then we start to build. We have great partnerships with Twitter. We have a great partnership with Snapchat. We've had a great partnership with Facebook. We talk to the networks very often,
And there are networks where we would make sense as part of their portfolio. Advisors runs on local television. The thing with Barstool is that it doesn't really matter where on the dial we are, because you're going to find us if you like us. And so it disrupts the need, and it's like show or network, or brand or network, which is more important. We know that our brand is more important. So, and I think the other thing that's hard about traditional media companies is they only have one form of revenue, or one primary form of variable revenue, which is advertising. And when you only have one source of revenue, and you have you are not diversified, it changes the entire power structure. So one of the things that I've done at Barstool is I do not like dependency. So I'm not dependent on any particular advertiser, and I'm not solely dependent on any one source of revenue. And that enables me to protect our talent, because I know if the Daily Beast article comes out and people start to get skittish about, Barstool Sports, I know I can push merch. And if we have fulfillment problems in merchandise and we know that like we're at capacity around this, that, or the other product, I can move it into advertising, or into subscription, or live events, or licensing, or whatnot. So that's kind of how I think about it. Does that answer your question? He's not.
In the back there?
Yeah, great question. So when I got to Barstool, there were a lot of Barstool accounts, and I wasn't at that point completely sure who worked for Barstool and who didn't work for Barstool. And we've since ratcheted that back. But one thing we launched in 2016 was something called the Viceroy Program. So the Viceroy Program today has 300 schools, and we have about 1,000 kids, 1,000 students that work with Barstool around those accounts. And what we do with those accounts is a couple things, which is, one, we break college news. So like the college newspaper, which when I was in college, that's what you read, and that's where you understood what was happening with the athletes or what was happening with the administration or whatnot. Now we provide a local Barstoolized flavor to what's happening through social accounts that are run by students at those schools. Two, the second thing it enables us to do is to trend instantly, because we have, you can imagine on Twitter, simultaneously in 300 different DMAs, something is happening. And so it kicks the algorithm that something is happening. And that's how we're able to drive tune in. That's how we're able to drive merch. Like, we use it to fuel our business. And then ultimately, we want to resonate with college kids. So we want to make sure that the, Barstool Zoomass guy is, connecting, finding talent, sharing things that are funny, sending things that we think, or that they think we should think are funny. So we use it as a feeder program. We use it as a way to connect on a local level. And then we use it as a big marketing platform. And then ultimately we use, we enable our brand partners. So for example, we were at LSU the weekend before last, and we did a huge thing at Fred's, which is like one of the most legendary bars at LSU. Like, we created a whole activation with Bud Light at Fred's, and the only way we did that was because we activated the Viceroy to help make that happen. And then we use it as a talent recruitment, to be honest. So most of our, if you look at, anyone who works at Barstool, who's been at Barstool under a year, I would say 50% of them come from our Viceroy program. So we use it to recruit talent to work at Barstool.
All right, final question, Erika. This is a room filled with people that want to work in the sports business. What's your go-to piece of advice for them to just get into the business?
That's a great question. I think there's a couple things, which is, one, I think that find a path where you can learn as much as you can, right? I've always loved sports. I'm fairly new to working in sports media. I worked at Yahoo. I helped launch Yahoo Sports, so I guess that counted. But I would be less consumed with what the image is of where you work. I would be extremely consumed with, are you working for someone who pushes you and who is driving you to try new things, to be uncomfortable in a positive way, of learning new things, taking on new responsibility. I think you want to, I have a woman I mentor who I met last night for a drink, and I was like, she works at Fox, and she wants to leave Fox, and she's like, well, what do I do? And I think you have to think about things as like, okay, where can you get the most experience? Where can you learn from the best people? And it doesn't matter if it's not the highest pedigree place or it's a startup that's going to fail. I've worked at like 5 total failure startups, but I learned so much. I wouldn't be able to do Barstool if I hadn't screwed up so many times before. So I think the biggest thing is just to get your hands into the mix, and no job should be beneath you. And just work hard and find people who believe in you and can push you, and the rest will follow. I think the worst thing is to be bored. Like if you are bored but have like a cushy title, or you make a lot of money, or you're at a place with pedigree, I think you're screwed, because there's someone younger, hungrier, with less advantage than you who is going to work harder to get to a better place. And Barstool is kind of like that. It was, I'll give you an example. Sorry, I'm rambling. Do you need me to shut up?
No, you're doing great.
Are you guys okay? I'll shut up in a second. But I have a recruiter working for us. We're looking for a CFO, and I have a recruiter working for us. And the recruiter called me 2 days ago and was explaining the list of candidates who were going to come in for the role, or that she was talking to about the role. And she made this really big point of like, oh, they went to Wharton. Like, then I'm like, okay, Wharton, I get it. Like they went to Wharton, which is great. I think, I think programs like this one are so lucky. It's such an advantage. Like the people you have access to and the quality of education you're getting, like those are amazing things. And what I asked her was like, okay, so what has the Wharton person done? Like, what did the Wharton person do with their Wharton education to go make something? And at Barstool, we have people who dropped out of college. We have people who skipped college altogether. And we have a ton of kids from a good, like Fordham. Like Fordham is like one of the biggest pipeline schools into Barstool Sports, because they have very practical knowledge of how to cut video, how to edit, how to run a podcast, how to market a podcast, how to manage a social account. So my thing is like, you guys have so much advantage. Like this is one of the best schools in the world. How are you taking this education and putting your hands into a place where you can make great things happen? Whether they succeed or fail long term, it's just the trying that matters. And that's what I think is most important.
I couldn't agree with that anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, Erika Nardini. Of
Thank
Barstool
you.
Sports.